All right, in this lesson, we are going to unpack the HTML a little bit more and really kind of dig in and talk more specifically about the nitty gritty and ins and outs of text and markup. So again, tags are commonly known as what we call markup. So remember our definition for HTML was hypertext markup language. You don't won't hear me refer to it as markup. I'll just call them tags or elements, but we need to know the language that we're working with since we're getting a little bit more into this. So when we talk about markup, and we will be mainly concerned primarily, especially in our demos, with the structural markup, but I want you to understand how they work. So we have structural markup, and these are elements that you can use to describe both headings and paragraphs. So again, your basic headings, your basic paragraphs, a few more structural things, but these are the main items that we will be working with. And semantic. That provides extra information about markup or emphasis. Maybe there's something that's supposed to be in quotations or something that's supposed to be bold or strong. That is semantic. So structure is establishing your hierarchy in your site, right? This is the header, this is a paragraph, this is a bulleted list. And then semantic might give extra information about what you have set within your structure, okay? So headings and paragraphs, again, are structural markup. I want to break this down a little bit further and show you what your options are. So headings and paragraph tags. HTML has 6 levels of headings. So we have, and they're super easy, as long as you can remember H, that's a heading, and then 1 through 6. So we have H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. So this is just straight text, so you're not seeing what that actually looks like. But when we code this out, this is going to be our boldest header, and this level 6 will still be kind of bold, like a little bolder than our regular paragraph text, but it will be the smaller. So these all essentially go from large to small. H1 is the largest, H6 is the smallest. So for example, even if you aren't coding from the back end, almost any web content creator that you use, Webflow, Squarespace, all of them, Wix, Weebly, they will almost always have an area where you can modify your settings for your H1 header, your H2 header. They may not call it an H1 or H2. They might say main header, subheader, but this is what that's referring to. When you are clicking those settings on the front end, this is what it's modifying. It's doing the work for you in the back end of the code, okay? Paragraphs. This is a paragraph tag. A paragraph will look like this if you are paying attention. There's a typo there, not intentionally, but there should be a closing tag. You should see the /. So these guys, these elements, the H1s, and the headings, you will always have an opening and a closing tag. Same thing with same thing with a paragraph. You will always have an opening and a closing tag. Okay. One thing important to note, especially with regard to spacing and structure, by default, a browser will show each paragraph on a new line, okay? So every time you have a paragraph, whether it's 2 words or 10 lines, it will show, so for example, if I have a paragraph here, and then I have another paragraph below it, that will automatically show it on another sort of space a little bit for me and put that on another line. So let's try that together. Again, this is a presentation that's previously used in face-to-face courses, so the demos will be when you guys actually get to class, so we can really spend some hands-on time with that. But now let's talk about bold, italics, etc. Okay, semantic markup, as this is known as. So for example, and again, this has changed a little bit. You can also modify some of this information in the CSS. But just traditionally, if you want to bold like a single word in something, you could say this is how we make a word appear bold. And you will notice this semantic structure, or the semantic markup here. We have the B for the opening and the closing tag. And if we visually saw this, the word bold would be the only thing that is bolded, and the paragraph is just the regular paragraph text. Okay, so anything between here appears to be styled bold. Paragraph is our structural markup, and these little guys here, the bold indications, that is our semantic markup. Same thing with italics. Again, if you want certain things to be consistently bold or italic throughout your whole site, you can modify that in the CSS. But if it is an isolated incident and you want to do that, you can use your semantic markup. So white space and line breaks. And again, we'll play with this in class, but I just want you guys, I just want to plant the seed so you understand how this is working when we are typing these things, or even when you are using, most importantly, I want you to understand when you're using a front-end editor, what that is doing, okay? So white space and line breaks. So again, when the browser comes across two or more spaces next to each other, it will only display one space unless you tell it otherwise, okay? So again, if it comes across a line break, it treats that as a single space too. This is what we call white space collapsing. With code, the web browser is smart enough to kind of guess and fix a couple of things for you. So, and it kind of just defaults to this. White space collapsing. So for example, this looks the same as this. So if you had spaces in between there, it would actually just show up as this, because the browser is just going to read that and close that up for you. All right, so how do we actually add a line break if we want spaces? So again, unless we specify, HTML displays each paragraph tag on a new line. If maybe we want to break these two sentences, or this sentence, maybe we want one line up top, one line on the bottom. I don't really know why we would want that, but this is just an example, okay? So this is the line break tag. You will notice that the line break is just this tag only. It doesn't come in a pair. So there are a few outliers where you don't have an opening tag, okay? So for example, we must add the correct tag to create this line break. So when we enter this part of the sentence will be on one line, this part of the sentence would be under the second line, okay? So we're forcing those line breaks. Now, as far as, again, controlling spacing over your whole website, that we actually want to control in the CSS, but this is just showing you, like, if we have specific incidents where we need to force a break outside of that, we would use the break tag, okay? We have horizontal rule, thinking about dividing, adding structure to your site. A rule adds a thin, again, divider. Gosh, just little typos, guys. I'm so sorry. A rule adds a thin divider line between graphs, or between paragraphs. So if we're talking about horizontal rule, we're just talking about a thin divider line. So if we have a paragraph here and then a horizontal rule, we would have a thin, visually what we would see, and again, we're going to play with this in our demo, we would have a thin line here, okay? Let's go back to those tags that only have one thing by themselves, or that has no words before or after it. These are known as empty elements. So if they're outliers and they sit alone by themselves with no opening tag, we refer to that as an empty element, okay? So for future use, it's important to note that if you're writing code, plan to copy that into a visual editor, or if you plan to copy that into a visual editor, it's best to use a plain text editor like Notepad. If you were using Microsoft Word, so if you maybe are typing a blog and you like to type your blog posts in Word first and then paste them over. Sometimes if you're copying over from Microsoft Word or even copying over from another website, that will bring in extra markup that you don't need and things will get really funky, okay? So have you ever tried to copy text from a Word doc into a visual editor like WordPress? It can get a little funky. So you want to make sure that you are using, if you are, even if you're just typing text to go onto the web somewhere, you want to make sure that you do that just in a plain text editor. There's even programs called Sublime Text where you can copy and paste text into that. That's a free download and that will strip any existing markup out of that for you. But you just want to be very conscious of that. You know, even trying to, sometimes things get really jacked up if I try to copy text from a website to Blackboard, because Blackboard will allow you to edit HTML to a certain extent on my end. Things get a little funky and sometimes I have to go in and strip stuff out or just retype it. All right, so again, let's try that together. Demo will be in class. All right, so we're stopping there with our text and markup. We have one more HTML lesson that I want to cover with you before you guys come to your next class, and we will go from there, okay?